I'm Flavia Zimmermann from the Australian Institute of International Affairs in Western Australia, and today we have with us Honorary Fellow from the School of Law at the University of Western Australia, Jun Wang, and we'll be discussing the Chinese One Belt, One Road initiative. Thank you for being with us, Jung.
It's my pleasure.
Jung, could you please explain to us exactly what comprises the One Belt, One Road initiative?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think we have this very helpful picture behind us, and that perfectly explains the One Belt, One Road initiative. In words, this One Belt, One Road initiative is comprised of two phrases or two parts. Part one is One Belt, which refers to the ancient Silk Road route, which is land-based initiative. And then you see the sea-based route, which is called Maritime Silk Road in the 21st century or 21st century Maritime Silk Road route. So that constitutes the second part, the One Road initiative. So it is called One Belt, One Road, or in China, in brief words, they just called it Belt and Road. In Chinese, 一带一路 or 带路. Yes.
Thank you very much, Jung. And could you please just explain to us, Jung, to which extent the One Belt, One Road initiative will impact trade relations around the world, and particularly economic integration with Eurasia?
Yes, this is a very good question, very interesting question. Now, in my view, I think this initiative will be of strategic importance to the Eurasia region because of its size and the sums of money that will be injected along a lot of countries, around 70 countries and jurisdictions along these two roads. One Belt Road, and the other one is obviously the Maritime Road. So I think the strategic importance may be divided into three parts. Part one, I think that may goes to the country's desire to tackle its own overcapacity problems domestically, because after so many years of developments domestically in China, China has accumulated very strong technical expertise, in particular in construction and engineering fields. You see a lot of, very, very impressive roads, airports, railways domestically in China, and they have a lot of experience there. And I think a part one of the strategic importance goes to the government desire to export its overcapacity and expertise that has been accumulated domestically in China. So that is number one. Number two, the part two of strategic importance, I think, goes to China's desire to influence, if you like, its neighbors in a number of ways, both in the cultural ways and also in an attempt to try to counterbalance the impact or influence of the United States in the region or its neighboring countries, because currently China's government do not feel very, if you like, comfortable with the situation surrounding its territory, and obviously it wants to do something to try to counterbalance the impact of the United States government, especially the previous government, the former government, Obama government, where obviously they had a strategy of rebalancing in Asia and getting back or returning to Asia. So China was not very comfortable with that, so it wants to do something. So naturally, it wants to expand its influence, both geographic and culture and economic influence around its neighbors. So that's part two of the strategic importance, I think. Part three, I think, of the strategic importance, I think perhaps will goes to my own area, namely the international law area. Namely, you see, China has lots of outbound investment projects, and more investment projects in various parts of the world, not just the One Belt, One Road countries, but also countries like Australia and the United States, Canada, and other developed countries, Britain, etc. So one difficulty or one challenge the Chinese government or the business community in China faces is the so-called international legal infrastructure or framework. Because currently, to be frank, this legal framework is pretty much dominated by the Western world, if you like, pretty much dominated, say, English law or New York law. The international conventions are pretty much driven by or dominated by the United States, UK, and the European Union. Okay, so that was, maybe the perception from China. So I think the government of China feels that the One Belt, One Road initiative is a very important opportunity for it to change this structure a little bit by voicing its own position in the international legal framework. And the easiest targets, if you like, will be those neighboring countries or countries in the Eurasia countries where we know there are a lot of challenges there. So more specifically, I would say the government of China wants to negotiate and sign a lot of bilateral and multilateral legal treaties covering investment, covering trade, covering technology transfer, etc., various areas of commerce and business, where it can have more say in terms of rights and obligations around these countries. So I think that might be a interesting factor or a factor of strategic importance in the minds of the Chinese government. So it wants to restructure the international legal framework for investor protection and investment promotion, things like that in the world. So I would say that perhaps the easiest way is to do this through this initiative where they will be pretty much the financer themselves, and therefore, presumably, they could have stronger say in terms of rights, obligations, treaties, things like that. And later on, they may try to use that as a leverage to renegotiate treaties with, say, United States, Britain, or Australia, more developed jurisdictions. So I think that might be the third part of strategic importance, via free trade agreements or investment protection and promotion agreements, things like that. Yeah, so that's my own view as to so-called strategic importance of this One Belt, One Road initiative.
Fascinating, Jung. Thank you. And Jung, if you could please just expand a little bit more on the impact that the One Belt, One Road initiative will have for critical infrastructural development across the globe.
Well, yes, it's a very big question. From what I can see, in terms of the critical infrastructure projects in the One Belt, One Road countries, because obviously you raised the question about global scale, I would say perhaps I deal with one by one. In terms of the One Belt, One Road countries themselves, in the we'll say next 5 years or so, we will see many large-scale infrastructure projects in these countries. Within these countries, we will see, for example, certain countries. For example, I would name, say, Pakistan, and let me see, for some African countries, say, Kenya.
Sri Lanka?
Sri Lanka, I'm not so sure because there are some local issues there, it's different voices. But Pakistan and Kenya might be on a different side of the picture. I would say that there will be a lot of major critical infrastructure projects there. For example, power stations, roads, railways, airports, and seaports. We will be seeing very modern and very complex or state-of-the-art projects in those jurisdictions. And I mentioned Pakistan because one of my cases will be involving Pakistan, and that will be something we can talk about later. So I think why I name this, say, Pakistan and a number of African countries, because I would say that the obstacles the government of China or the state-owned enterprise themselves will be facing in these countries will be lesser than, say, in other countries where you may say, various voices domestically in these countries. For example, in Myanmar, in India, in the Philippines, Indonesia, maybe we will see a lot of countries where currently things seems to be all right. However, no one can be sure what will happen in the next 5 years also because of domestic political issues, things like that. So I would say this is number one. Number two, in terms of the global scale, I'm not so sure, to be frank, because currently the One Belt, One Road initiative is still at its very early stage, while the recent forum, the high-level forum summit in Beijing, is widely regarded as a turning point of bringing this idea into action. So prior to the so-called Belt and Road International Cooperation Forum, which took place in Beijing just 9 days ago, where around 28 countries, heads of government went to Beijing to have a large-scale forum with President Xi in there. So apart from that, I would say that in the past 2 years also, or 3 years also, this idea was more like a slogan, if you like, or perhaps a concept. So nobody was so sure, even domestically in China, let alone say the world. But now, I think, to be fair to China, they are working out certain measures to be implemented in the years ahead. And I've got some documents, official documents, from China Daily, when I was actually in China in those days. So I was very fortunate to get the copies. And when I read through, I can see the idea seems to be clearer than, say, situation in 2 years ago or so. So I would say, it's a project that needs to be watched and see at this stage. However, I would say in terms of sizable infrastructure projects, we will be seeing some so-called flagship projects as such in countries like Pakistan and in some African countries, which are very friendly to China, and which may not have a lot of domestic turmoil, both domestic, political and legal and economic things like that. But if you ask me really critical infrastructure projects in the globe, I don't know, because this is a long-term project which may last, say, 30 years or 40 years. So, we're still at a very early stage.
Thank you very much, Jung. Now, just wrapping up our interview, Jung, if you could please just explain to us, in the long term, to which extent the One Belt, One Road initiative might reshape Australian-China trade relations.
Yes, I've been thinking of these issues for a long period of time, because I'm a China-born Australian, and I'm closely involved in this initiative. However, if you ask me this question, and then I have to give a very straightforward answer, to be very, very honest, I don't think so. I don't think it will be really something reshaping the bilateral relationship between Australia and China. I think for us, for Australia, the more important thing is the China-Australia Free Trade Agreement, and hopefully its updated version. Because from my viewpoint, from legal perspective, from international lawyers' perspective, I feel there are still a lot of areas where we can work on the Australian-China Free Trade Agreement in terms of quality of this legal instrument. So I think that will be something the Australian community should be more focusing on, apart from those people or businesses who are possessing very strong construction and engineering expertise and who want to export these things in the initiative. Other than that, I don't think so, because the economic structure in these countries and the mindset of these countries, I ask myself, are pretty not very relevant to this One Belt, One Road initiative. For us, I think, we shouldn't be very, very easily moved by the initiative. We just do our usual things and do the trade, do investment, care about protecting IP rights, things like that. So, frankly, I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Jung. And for more information, please visit our website www.internationalaffairs.org.au. Thank you.
Thank you very much.